Excellent. All right, today is week 10 of Ultimate Launch, and today we are going over the first offer. So we've gone through officially 10 weeks of all kinds of stuff, from building out your sphere of influence, to finding your niche, to building your brand, to networking, to social media, to all of the things we've gone through. And like with all weeks, if you missed any and you want to go back and see them, I have been doing a lot better of making sure that we're putting the videos up on the ROGU blog page as well as our YouTube channel. So I'm going to continue trying to be very vigilant about doing that right after the trainings. So you can see them there. And we also start Ultimate Launch all over again in March. So you'll be able to start fresh, start from the beginning, and go through all 10 weeks of Ultimate Launch again. This one is a new one for us. If you've taken Ultimate Launch before, you have not seen week 10. It used to be a 9-week program, and we've added week 10. So this is the first time that we've had week 10. And this is about going over your first offer, your first offer that you're putting in when you represent a buyer. So we're going to review some of the things that you need when you're doing your very first offer. So as with anything that I tell you guys, the action itself is less important than the prep work you put in before and the follow-up that you put forward after. So we always start with prepping for that first offer. So submitting your first offer as a real estate agent is a big step that requires preparation, confidence, and attention to detail. It's more than just paperwork. It's about representing your client's interests, negotiating effectively, and setting the stage for a smooth transaction. So let's walk through the key steps to ensure that your offer is professional, competitive, and likely to resonate with your sellers. All right, so step one is truly understanding what your client's needs and goals are. So before preparing the offer, it's really important to really talk through the motions with your buyers. What's most important to them? Is the price more important? Is the timeline what's important? Is contingencies and making sure that they're protected the most important thing? Are there any deal breakers or must-have conditions? So an example of a deal breaker would be maybe a sale and settlement contingency. They can't carry both mortgages, so they need to sell one house before they buy another house. Maybe having a home inspection is very important to them. And if they can't have one, it's a deal breaker. So know these deal breakers in advance and really talk them through those scenarios. Say, okay, well, if we can't get it at this price you want and they come back at this price, what's going to be the difference in payment of your mortgage? Or what's going to happen if they won't allow a sale and settlement contingency? If you have to carry both, what does that look like? So really talk about them and reflect on their priorities to help them understand how to strengthen their offer and prepare for the worst case scenario. So step two is research your comparable sales and market conditions. So a well-prepared offer is grounded in market research. Look up recent sales of similar properties in the area and identify trends in pricing, days on market, and negotiation patterns. Now, those of you who are more seasoned, who has put in an offer and then had the appraisal come in too low? By show of hands. And I know you can't see me, but my hand is up. April has. Yeah, we've all been there. Researching to make sure that you are doing your very best to prep your buyers in advance of certain things that could crop up, like appraisals or maybe conditions on the appraisals for repairs, survey issues that could crop up. Making sure that you're doing your best to understanding these factors so you can help advise them of what's to come should that happen. All right, prepping for your first offer continued. Step three is confirm financing and gather documentation. So this is so important. You want to make sure that your client's mortgage pre-approval is up to date. You have their proof of funds letter if they're paying in cash, and any other required financial documentation. And what we mean by this is if they have a pre-approval, make sure you have a copy of that pre-approval. If they're paying with cash, get your proof of funds. If they're buying in an LLC, now's the time to get those operating documents together. You want to make sure that you have everything ready for the listing agent. The worst thing that can happen is that there's multiple offers and you just haphazardly send in an agreement of sale and nothing else. Even if your offer is better than the competing offers, if it's not a complete offer, your offer could get rejected. So it's important to make sure that you are collecting all the data in advance. Step 4, prepare the offer documents with precision. Accuracy and thoughtfulness in paperwork reflect professionalism and commitment. Review your local offer topic, your templates, and ensure you know each section. Oh, hold on, I'm gonna let somebody in. Make sure that you know each section from the purchase price to the earnest money, to the contingencies, to the closing timelines. So if this is the first time you're doing it, please reach out to either myself as your broker or to your mentor to make sure that these documents are correct. Every detail matters. So double check your dates, your addresses, and your clauses to avoid delays or misunderstandings. This is super important. Again, if you're going up against another offer, to ensure that all of your documents are filled out properly. Okay, there's lots of things to consider. Yes, Rebecca.
I would say that it is very important to get those documents if they have an LLC, because you need to make sure who is able to sign, because I've had it come up where, you have someone sign and they're not a member or don't have an addendum, and, you have to make them sign documents all over again.
Absolutely. Great point. Great point. So let me ask you guys, for those who have done this before, let's say, for example, you fill out your entire offer form. And we just had this crop up the other day, and I'm not going to mention any names, but we've had this crop up before. So you've got an offer going in, you have a sale and settlement contingency, and you filled out all of your offer documents. And the question arises when it goes under contract is, when do the contingencies kick in? Do they kick in after the offer is signed, or once a contract is accepted on their current home? What's the answer on that? So when you're doing a sale and settlement contingency and the offer is accepted, when does the time period for inspection start? At offer acceptance, or offer acceptance on the home they have to sell?
Offer acceptance on the home they have to sell.
So what dictates that?
I forget. I've done it once before, actually, with April. And I forget what we ended up doing.
Yeah. So if you write an offer subject to sale and settlement, and you put in 15 days contingency for your home inspections, the home inspections start on the day of the ASR acceptance, not on the acceptance of the sale on their current property. So this is what I mean by checking your considerations. You have to know this contract forwards and backwards. Now, it's not to say that you can't. You can add in additional terms or addendum that says the time periods for contingencies begin on offer acceptance of their subject property. But if you don't, then they are doing inspections and appraisals on a property that they haven't even truly secured yet. Now, is it possible that the listing agent will let it ride? Sure, it's possible. But a savvy listing agent who is kind of a ball buster is going to stick you with it. Jamie's smiling because she's like, I'd stick them with it. I'd stick them with it. Depends on how nice they are during the transaction, right?
If I needed to.
So just watch. You have to know these things. So this is why this is important, to really gather that data and think about every scenario before you put in this offer, and making sure that what you're putting in this offer aligns with the desires of your client. So you want to make sure that you're checking these things. And it just happened to crop up this week. It's something that we often forget to review. And thank you for the person who did ask me that question, because it reminded me to review it on this call. So, All right, step 5, discuss and finalize offer terms with your client. So once you've drafted the offer, it's time to sit down with your client and go over the offer. And this is a step that most seasoned agents miss. And this is probably one of the most important steps that we can do. Again, it's more about the prep and more about the follow through and less about the actual action. So the action for the client is docu-signing the documents. All of the work goes into the prep and the follow through. DocuSigning is easy because they hit DocuSign and DocuSign doesn't even let them read the documents unless they scroll up, and it becomes this like back and forth pain in the butt thing to do. So it's important that you talk to the client about what the document says before it is delivered. It is your job as an agent to review each component of the document and answer any questions to the best of your ability. Now, let me be very clear. We should not be giving legal advice. We're not attorneys, but you can let them know that my personal and professional opinion of this document reads this way. We also need to let them know that they have the right to have those documents reviewed by legal counsel before signing should they want to, and that is listed in the document. But again, most buyers don't read what they're signing. So it's important for you to go over those, okay? This also allows you this final time to make sure there's no revisions. And you know how buyers can be, especially buyers who are kind of, emotional or excited or stressed or feeling all of these different feelings about getting into a new house, to really go over those final details with them again. The purchase price is this. The earnest money deposit is this. It's due in this many days. The seller's assist we're asking for is this. The buyer agency compensation we're asking for is this. This is going to be the respond to date. This is going to be the settlement date. This is your financing contingency, and these are the terms based on that. These are your home inspection contingencies, and this is how it works, and these are the terms on that. And then we can go over things like closing cost, who pays what on transfer stamps, those types of things the whole way through the contract. And you can tell I don't have a contract in front of me, but I could verbatim tell you that page 1 is the cover page. Page 2 goes over the price, the earnest money deposit, the closing time frames, who pays what transfer tax. Page 3 is your financial documents of who they're getting their financing through, when their appraisal is going to be done, when their mortgage commitment needs to be delivered. Page 4 is when we're start talking about different type of inspections. That carries over to page 5, and so on and so forth. So it is important that you memorize this document and know where each one of these fields are so that you can properly advise and educate your clients on what they are signing. Okay. All right. Step 6 is your submission and follow-up stage. This is where you're either sitting down with your clients, having them sign the documents in front of you, or like we most do, send them via DigiSign, DocuSign, whatever you're using. And then you want to go ahead and submit that to the listing agent. So when it's time to submit your offer, send it to the listing agent promptly and in a clear, organized format. Include any additional documents such as the pre-approval letter and provide a concise summary to the listing agent highlighting the strengths of your client's offer. Be ready to answer any questions and follow up proactively to demonstrate your commitment to the transaction. So by preparing thoroughly, you'll set a strong foundation for future negotiations and transactions. So keep in mind, you need to be very professional on how you're submitting this offer, especially if it's your first offer. Do not let them smell your fear. Do not let them smell your fear, especially if you're a new agent. That's super hard to do, but you want to make sure that your offer is prepared in a way that it looks super highly professional, that shows them that you mean business, that you know what you're doing, you've put it together, you've spent the time, you've done the data, you've done the research, and this is going to set the stage for the listing agent that this is going to be a smooth transaction with you. As a listing agent, I can tell you personally that I have sat down with multiple offers with my seller, and the seller has asked, yeah, they're all pretty similar. Which one is going to be the easiest to deal with? And it's never about the buyers because I don't know who the buyer is, but I can tell you that I often pick one out of the crowd and said, you know what? I've dealt with this one at least 7 times, and she is professional. She is courteous. She's respectful. She does what she says. She keeps all of her promises, and I've never had a fall through or a problem with this offer, with this person. So your reputation will precede you when it comes to you submitting offers to others. Do not take that for granted. Your industry peers, even from other companies, may or may not use your own professional personality for you or against you, and that equals dollars. So we'll go over a couple tricks and things that you can use that are included with your membership. Use them, don't use them, totally up to you, can't force you, but we're going to go over some tools in this training too. Okay, real quickly, some required documents that you're going to need. So what do we collect and what do we have signed as part of our initial offer? So first and foremost is that consumer notice. You should have had it signed before meeting with them to do an offer. It should really be signed at your first interaction. I know the entire industry is really bad at that, but I'm going to just voice that again, that they should be signing the consumer notice. A good habit to get into is when you initially meet somebody and they're doing that single property showing or signing your BAC, have that consumer notice signed. If you had it signed before, it's always a good measure to have them sign it again at their offer. So make sure you're getting that in advance. That is not my role. That is not a Realty One role. That is a state role. Okay. Buyer's agency agreement. You cannot submit an offer without a buyer agency agreement. We usually had these signed at the offer, you know, for years and years and years, but now you must have this signed in advance. So if you do not already have one on file, please get it before they sign the offer because you don't want to end up getting dinged with that. And neither do I. Seller's disclosure statement should be signed before the offer is signed. So make sure that you are delivering them a copy of the seller's disclosure statement, allowing them the time they need to read it and understand it, and make sure it is signed completely during the offer. Lead-based paint addendum for all homes that are applicable. So newer homes are not applicable to the lead-based paint addendum, but if you're selling a slightly older home, then you will need to have that lead-based paint addendum signed. Next is the OGM disclosure. That's oil, gas, and mineral rights. So make sure that you have that disclosure signed. Now, this is always the rolling question of like, which one do we use? There's all these different documents. So the OGM disclosure addendum to the listing contract is the questionnaire that only the seller signs. This you would have to obtain from the listing agent. Not all listing agents and not all listing brokers require the OGM to be signed. We ask you to get it because chances are there's going to be instances when you need it. So we just put it in our files and say, hey, just get it in advance because we know it's going to save you from pulling your hair out later. So the addendum, the OGM addendum to the sales agreement is the one that both parties sign that has on front page waive and elected, which just says your client is either waiving the right to search for oil, gas, and mineral rights being attached or unattached or leases to the property, or they're electing it and they're going to hire an attorney to do that. So make sure that you have that available. So it gives them the right to decide whether they're going to have that service or not. Please keep in mind that the title company will not search the title for oil, gas, and mineral rights. They can look at the deed, and a lot of times they do, even though they're not required to do that. They can look at the historic deed to see if maybe there was any indication that it was split off at some time, or if there's any type of verbiage in the current deed that says the oil, gas, and mineral rights are separated and or on document number XYZ. But it's not their responsibility to see whether this person owns the mineral rights under the ground or if there's any type of lease. An attorney that deals with that is really the one you're going to want to reach out to. What the current cost of that is, I don't know. I haven't had one done in years, but it used to be quite costly. There is an attorney in Newcastle that can do this for you. So if you ever run into that situation, just please let us know. Next is a standard agreement of sale, which all of you are familiar with. And then buyer's estimated cost sheet, which we're going to go over. That's always like the number one question is how do I fill out a buyer's estimated cost sheet? And a little food for thought is if you do not know how to or do not want to fill out a buyer's estimated cost sheet because there's lots of variables there we don't know, especially if there's a mortgage on the property. Best course of action is to go to the lender and the lender can provide you a buyer's estimated cost sheet on their form, which you can have your clients sign and date. And that fulfills your obligation with the state to have a buyer's estimated cost sheet on file. Okay, so you can go straight to your lender, especially if you're using Sarah, and say, hey, I need a cost sheet with all the lender fees in it. These are any of the charges that I have on my side. Can you produce that for me? She says, yep, I got to do one anyway for my file. So she'll produce it and then she'll email it over to you. And you just have them throw a signature and a date anywhere you want on the blank space of that form, upload it to your SkySlope, and you are set to go. Okay. Let's see, wire fraud notice we require. Pre-approval, proof of funds you'll need to have, and please, for the love of God, get a copy of their photo ID. I'm telling you this, most brokers don't require it. There's no regulation saying that you have to have a photo ID, but I can tell you that, one, you need to ensure that the spelling of their name exactly matches their photo ID. Do not assume you know how to spell their name. The spelling of their name must exactly match their photo ID. Let me tell you a real quick story, not to make this training any longer than it has to be, because this is a longer training. I did not collect a photo ID about 4 years ago. The guy's name was David. How hard can it be to spell David, right? I knew this guy for most of my life, sold his house, wrote up the documents, he signed it, we closed, everything was fine. Then he gets a copy of his deed back in the mail. David is not spelled the same way that everybody else spells David, and now he needs a corrective deed. Who do you think had to pay for that corrective deed? I did, because it was my mistake. And it was a $300 mistake because I had to pay for the corrective deed and I had to pay for the cost to the court to have that corrective deed filed. So it was a $300 mistake. And my clients were really mad at me for a hot minute. I mean, we made up, it was fine. I told them I'll take care of it. It's not a big deal. But that's just an example of why it is so important, even if you know the people personally, to collect photo ID. In addition to that, there are scammers out there who will tell you that they are one person when they are really not. So it is important to collect photo ID before having anybody sign anything, because they're going to have to show it at closing. And the last thing you want to do is do 45 days of work to get to closing and find out that the person who signed the documents is not the person who's closing on the property. And then we have a real conundrum, right? So grab that photo ID, tell them, hey, need you to do me a favor. This is for security purposes. Snap a photo of the front and back of your IDs and text them to me so I have them for the file. And then I'll go ahead and send you that DocuSign. Okay. All right. So now we are going to review putting a packet together in SkySlope real quickly. Let me get out of here. And here we are in our one login. So once you're in your one login, you're going to go ahead and toggle to SkySlope. And this is going to open up your SkySlope dashboard. And sorry, my computer's taken so long. It is on its last leg today. All right, I'm going to go up here to apps. I'm going to pull down on forms. Once my forms load, I'm going to go here to start buyer agreement. Did I do that right? No, that's not what I want to do. I lied. Let me go back. No, I'm going to go to create. Sorry. Go to create. And then I'm going to start filling out the information. So I'm going to make a pretend buyer. So we're going to put buyer here. And we're going to name her Julie Test. And we're going to put in a fake email. Well, not a fake email. It's my email, my old email. All right. And then it's going to ask you, is there a property yet? You can, if there is a property and you have your MLS fully integrated into your SkySlope, if you don't, by the way, please see your TC that can integrate whatever MLSs you participate in into your SkySlope. And if you participate in more than one, you can connect more than one. So your TCs can help you do that. Go to import MLS data, and I'm going to put in my listing which I pray we get an offer on soon. Is that the correct MLS number? What is that MLS number? Let me find it. Guess I should have had this information ahead of time. All right. MLS number, working on my app here. Why is it so hard to find what you're looking for in the app? Oh, here it is. Okay. Maybe because I'm looking in the wrong place. 3559. There we go. So I'm going to do an offer on my property here. Now, one thing to note is that sometimes when you pull it up, it will put like road at the end or ab. I don't know why it does that. I haven't been able to figure it out, but you just take that out. And then normally I would keep the file name, the property address, just because that's how I organize things. You can also organize it as the client name just by clicking here, and it'll save the file as Julie Test. So you can do that. And then we're going to go down here and it's going to ask me which forms I want to start using. And with me, I'm going to use my buyer's packet and click create. Also, if you do not have your buyer's packet set up, please again, talk to your TC. They'll help you do that. All right, so this is going to give me the documents that I need to get started. Okay. You'll see that the seller's disclosure, lead-based paint, and OGM are not included in this packet. And this is where I would go ahead and click upload documents and drag and drop them into here because these are documents that need to be pre-filled out by the seller. Obviously, this is a test, so I'm not including them here, but please don't forget that step that you need to make sure that you do that. Okay, so I'm going to select all my forms and I'm going to go down here to the corner and click fill and send. All right, you can see that the buyer's information plugged in here. And then I'm going to start with a mailing address. So I got to give this buyer a mailing address. And we're going to say it is 315 7th Street in Elwood City and save. And that's going to come up here. Then we need to put in the seller's information. And my seller's name is my dad, Keith Hoffmeyer. And then I'm going to put in his street address here and click save. And it populates right in the box. Next, I'm going to go down to the property information. So you can see when you import the data, it has the street address, 4626 Elwood Road. But if you look on this bottom line, it says Wayne Township / Lawrence, PA. This is inaccurate, and this is something you need to pay very special attention to because it is asking you for the postal mailing address. Your postal address and your municipality address are something completely different. So make sure that you're going in and removing the city, and we're going to put Elwood City, PA, and then the correct zip code. Now, this isn't going to happen on all files. So some files will populate correctly because Elwood City is Elwood City. However, this one falls outside the outskirts of Elwood City, which is why it came up Wayne Township. And the reason why that does that is just because the way that the West Penn feeds the data into SkySlope, some of the fields that it communicates with don't make 100% sense. So even though you pre-filled it out because you have your template set up, you still want to check to make sure that the data came over in an appropriate way. So in the municipality of, I'm going to take this out, and this is where you put the township, Wayne Township. And then the school district is not Sharon. I don't know why it populated Sharon, but school district is Elwood City area. Okay. One thing that is not going to put in for you is the tax ID number or the identification marker. And these are two different things. They can be the same thing. They could be different. But here's what I do. The tax number is where I would put the parcel identification number, also known as the tax number, alternate tax number, or PID number. Okay, so just depending on what you're looking at, it could be all of those things. And it's usually just a big number. Now, if you're further up north, it may have letters in it. If you're in Pittsburgh, it could have letters in it and look kind of funky. But most of the time, it's going to look something like this. And I just made this up. But your tax number or parcel identification number will look something like this. Now, in identification, what I do as a secondary step is I add some additional information about the legal description. So I take the there's a little code on the tax card for your legal description that will say something like this: 100 by 50, lot 25, Henry's plan, house, garage, outbuilding. Okay. And it'll say something different for all of you. But I always copy and paste that and put that in. This is to allow the title searcher some additional information on what is being conveyed. Okay. So again, another example is that we have a listing for a house and we only have one PID number to be conveyed. Okay. But somewhere along history, there was a lot next door, a house burnt down, the person bought it. This lot became property of the house lot. So unbeknownst to us, there are two parcel identification numbers. And now we have a house on one lot and we have a garage on the other. Okay, so what I would do is put the PID number that I know that I feel is accurate on here. And then I would put the full lot size, the lot number, and then I have house, garage, and outbuilding. This is going to tell the title company that those are the structures that are there. So when they pull the title and they see, oh, okay, I have for this PID, I have a house on it, but no garage, that can prompt them to look for another PID that contains the garage and then notify the buyer that we need to add another PID number to the transfer. So it's just kind of a secondary layer of like, hey, this is what I see. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. Maybe I missed something. It's just a good communication. This also entitles your client to purchase the house, the garage, and the outbuilding. Okay. So another quick thing to make sure is before I was an agent, I bought my last house that I owned. I was supposed to be receiving a house and two neighboring lots for the purchase price that I had paid. Okay. So we did the contract. Everything was fine. I closed using an agent because I wasn't an agent at that point. And then once I closed, I then wanted to get a survey of my property, only to find out that the lot to the right was not conveyed to me. I went back to the seller. We wanted to do a corrective deed to include the parcel, and he said no. He had already sold it to somebody else. So I lost the lot to the right that contained half of my driveway. And they in turn sold it to somebody else and they put a house on it right up against my garage. Huge lesson learned of making sure that you're putting in as much information as possible, because if the other party is less than ethical, then your clients could end up losing part of the property. All right, buyer's relationship with licensed broker. You want to make sure that you have your information in here. And then this is the seller's agent information, which you would type in here. Okay. Moving on to page 2, we are reviewing today's date would go in here, the date of the offer. And then the purchase price goes into this line. As you type the purchase price, the wording will display on the bottom. Now, item number 1, initial deposit within 5 days if not specified of the execution date. This is your earnest money deposit, hand money, whatever you call it. And this is where we would put that deposit in. Now, these other lines call for an additional deposit, which sometimes do come into play, although it's rare. They can do an additional deposit 15 days after the execution date, allowing for their time for their home inspections, things like that. You could put that there. You could also put additional deposit after mortgage, whatever, you could put that there. All right. So All funds paid by buyers, including deposit monies, will be paid by check, cashier's check, or wired funds. This is important because we do not accept cash. You new agents out there, or you agents getting ready to be licensed, please do not accept cash. We do not accept cash in any way, shape, or form. If you walk into the office with a fat stack of cash and tell me it's earnest money, it's going to be a whole thing. It's going to be a whole thing. So please do not accept cash. We cannot accept cash. Deposits, regardless of form of payment, will be paid by US dollars to the broker for seller. This is where you put Realty One Group Ultimate, unless you've negotiated something else. We move down to the most confusing area of the contract, and that is paragraph 3 on page 2. All right. Who loves this paragraph? Nobody. I know, right? Okay. Buyer broker fee. This is something new. If you've been in the market here for a while, this is all new. It makes us all want to pull our hair out because nobody does it the same way. So I'm going to tell you how I prefer to do it and other ways that you can do it. So your buyer broker fee is what the seller is paying for your commission as a concession to the offer. Okay. So this is what the seller is paying of your fees. So there's 2 ways you can negotiate this. You can negotiate this like some companies do with what's called a CBC. Okay. Cooperating Broker Commission Form. It is a CBC. The CBC is written out by the listing agent that says we're going to give 2.5 whatever, or 3 or 100 or whatever, because I'm not allowed to even, say amounts anymore in this day and age, to the buyer when you bring an accepted offer. So that's a CBC, and that's negotiating it in advance to you writing the offer. And a lot of companies do that. Many companies, much like ours, are switching this around because we don't like the CBC. Because let me read you this. In addition to any cooperating compensation negotiated between the brokers using a cooperating broker compensation agreement, PAR form CBC, or via other agreement, seller will pay the following fee to broker for buyer on behalf of the buyer at settlement. So this means that you're asking, if you have a CBC, you're asking for additional compensation. So in this instance, you are working with a listing agent, and a listing agent has signed a CBC saying that they're going to pay you 2% of the seller's funds towards your commission. They sign it, you sign it, good. Now, let's say that you want 3%. So how you would fill this out is you would put an additional 1% of the purchase price on paragraph 3, section 8. So you have the 2% CBC and an additional 1% here on paragraph 3. However, if you do not have a CBC, if you just have a verbal, well, they're going to pay 2.5%, and you just take that as word and you put 1% in here, guess how much you're getting paid? 1%, because you don't have it in writing. So how other brokers handle it, much like I handle it, is if an agent calls me and says, I'm going to show your property, is the seller offering a CBC? I say, yes. The seller would love to offer you a CBC commission of 2.5%. And they'll say, can you send me the CBC form? No, I don't do that. We don't use the CBC form. But I'm verbally telling you that they're already prepared to pay 2.5%. So you can write in 2.5% or whatever compensation you're looking for on page 2 of your offer, section 3. That way it keeps it very clean and nobody's misunderstanding anybody. Okay? That's how I choose to handle it. That's how I would like all of you guys to handle it. But again, every brokerage is different. Okay? So this may not be how you're getting a response from other agents. Now we've had, yes, April.
Can we use that broker offer compensation form that's on the Rogu agent website? Like if we're the listing agent, just to send it to them, so they have something in writing too, along with just telling them to put it in the offer?
You can, but again, that becomes, so if you read this again, it says cooperating broker compensation agreement or via some other agreement. So if that is signed, and if it's 2.5, and then the agent puts 2.5 on this form, that becomes 5%. So you want to be very careful of it.
Do one or the other. Like either tell them just put it in there, or some agents like really want something in writing before they, write the offer up. So in that case, we could use that and just tell them that don't put it
you
in.
definitely can. I don't like the CBC form, and I know we've talked about this in the past. I don't like the CBC form because if you look at the PAR CBC form, the very first line says this document is not intended to be used as an addendum to the agreement of sale, which means it's non-enforceable as an addendum. It's non-enforceable. I think that leaves us open to, as an industry, to potential litigation with a seller who feels a certain way of how this transaction has gone. Maybe he gets mad at his agent or the other agent or the buyers or just everybody, because you know how emotional selling a home can be to some people. To say, well, there's no buyer broker fee on page 2. I've read and reviewed my documents, so I shouldn't have to pay that. And then we put forward, well, we have the PAR CBC form that were signed by the parties. Well, that's fine. Me as a seller, I didn't sign it. And it says it cannot be made an addendum to. The broker signed that. So that 2.5 that I'm paying my listing agent now goes to the buyer's agent. And that's where I could see this heading. It's just a matter of time. So the seller signs the agreement of sale. To me, I sleep easier at night knowing that it is very clear to a consumer who does not understand what we do on the back end. And keep that in mind, that most bad feelings happen because somebody didn't know and it wasn't properly disclosed in a way that makes sense to them. So putting it on here and having that conversation with them and reminding them, hey, when we listed, we talked about this. You said 2.5. They put it on the contract. They're okay with the 2.5. They agree. Everybody's kosher. We're good. I think is a better maneuver to have. Just my own personal opinion, not legal advice. All right. Closing cost assistance. This is where your seller's assist goes. They've changed the wording. It doesn't say seller's assist anymore. We're not calling it seller's assist anymore. We don't want to trigger sellers. So closing cost assistance in paragraph 3, section B. This is where you would put, if you have FHA, VA, even conventional, sometimes gets seller's assist. So let's assume here that the buyer broker compensation, I'm asking for 2.5%. And in closing costs, my clients need 6% of the sales price. Okay. It's going to take you right down to the settlement and possession. So you're going to go ahead and put your closing date in. I'm going to pop that in there and we're good on that section. So remember, section A is your commission. Section B is seller's assist. Any questions on that? I know that trips everybody out. Nope. All right. So we put in the settlement. There, you'll see that this line here is for taxes. So usually we know that the buyers have their buyers have their closing costs, sellers have their closing costs. However, there are times where to make a deal, we have to shuffle some costs from one side to the other side. So if you've got any of those weird situations where the seller is going to cover both sides of the transfer tax or anything like that, you could put that here. If for those of you who are new, don't worry about this section too much. There's all kinds of different things that you can put in here. Most of the time you're going to leave it blank. But when you encounter a situation where the lender is telling you, hey, we need to ask the seller to pay for this, or we need a different type of deed or whatever, come to me and we're going to work through those together, because that could be a whole nother 2-hour training, which we don't have time to do today. Okay. Down here is date and time is of the essence. So you're going to want to put in a date, and then sometimes people put in a time, which is totally fine. The average for response is 24 hours, just so that you know. And most commonly, like if your offer is signed today on the 21st, they would have to respond by the 22nd at midnight. Okay, so if there's no time, it is assumed that it is midnight. That's not always the case. Sometimes, especially if it's an REO, they need additional days response. But can anybody guess why we traditionally do 24 hours only? What's a good reason? And there are a couple, but what's a good reason why we usually only give a 24-hour time period?
In case other offers come in, we want them to decide about ours first.
Yes, yes. Time is of the urgency. Yes, we want them to get that offer out before anybody else has a chance to get an offer in. What's another reason? No? Quiet, guys. All right. Think of it this way. Okay. If your clients are looking at multiple properties, let's say you went out for a property showing and they've looked at 5 homes that are on the market and they love 2 of them. Okay. So they put an offer in on this one, but we put a 5-day response on it. One, other offers can come in during that time period. And I've seen 5 days responses on some of these contracts. So other offers can come in during that time, but it also locks these buyers into this contract until the time period expires. So let's say you put the offer in, you have an extended time period for who knows what reason. And then their other home that they were on the fence about, like they really, you know what I mean? They were kind of neck and neck, all of a sudden has a $15,000 price reduction. And they threw in a home warranty. And now your buyers are like, I don't want this house anymore. I want this other one. Well, they're stuck like Chuck on this contract. They can't physically make an offer on another property or maybe another one that hit the market because they're still waiting on this property. They are contractually dedicated to this property. So if the seller signs this agreement, even if it's verbally rescinded and the time period is still open, they have the ability to force your clients to buy. Now, does that happen in most instances? No. But I can tell you that in my, I'm not going to tell you my age, but in my long history of doing this, I have had one instance where this happened. They went to court, they forced the sale, and these buyers had to buy the property. I also got 0 commission for that deal because it went to court. So just so you know, it can happen. I hate to be, bad news bear, but learn from my experience. All right, going on to the next page, let's go through these pretty quickly, is your zoning. So if there's any type of zoning, you can put that here. Maybe it's, some mixed use zoning, commercial, it's something wackadoodle like that. Inclusions, this is where you're going to put in what's included. And this particular property has an electric stove. It has a fridge. It has a dishwasher. It has a garbage disposal. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Butchered that. Nope. Butchered it again. I don't know what's up with me today. All right, good enough. All right, so this is where you're going to put in your inclusions. And even if it mentions the inclusions on the MLS, it is important that you write them in. Because if you don't write them in, a listing agent could assume that you are removing them as part of the contract, especially if your price is lower than ask. So that's very possible that you can do. You can say, hey, I don't want your appliances. Take them out and sell them. This is the price that I want for the property. So please ensure that you are at least copying and pasting what's in the MLS into your contract. Because if you do not, then the sellers can remove those items because they weren't properly negotiated in ahead of time. Excluded fixtures would be here. And let's say there's a note on the MLS, and this is not the case with this property, but Tiffany lights in dining room excluded, because you know that was a family heirloom and the little old lady that lives there, it was her mother's and she's taking it with her. Okay, so you can exclude that there. And that's also very important because the last thing you want is to have your buyers walk in and the chandelier is not there, and then they're very upset. So you want to make sure that this is here. Okay. Next, moving on to buyer financing. If it is an FHA or VA loan, you see this big blocked in, they have it bordered here because it is important. If you are working with FHA or VA, appraisal contingency is already worked into your offer. If it is a conventional loan and you want it contingent on appraisal, then you have to provide an additional addendum. So here it says it's expressly agreed, notwithstanding any other provisions of the contract, buyer will not be obligated to complete the purchase as described in here unless it reaches the purchase price. Okay, so a lot of people will type in, the price here, which you can do. However, if you leave it blank, it automatically reverts to purchase price as stated in the agreement. So you actually don't have to put anything in there. And it just updates as the offer updates. All right. This goes over the HUD notice. So for your protection, get a home inspection. If they have one of those, you can click there. And then down here, we're looking at mortgage contingencies. If there is a mortgage on the property, you're going to click waived or elected here. If they're paying cash, you can click waived. But we're going to assume that they're getting a mortgage. So we're going to put that right in there. Okay. And then this little line here, which most agents forget to fill out, is buyer will promptly deliver a copy of documentation to the seller, but in any case, no later than, and this is going to be your mortgage commitment date. As a rule of thumb, you could do that about a week to 2 weeks prior to your closing. So go ahead and throw your date in there. Now we want to take the pre-approval letter or any correspondence you have with the lender and go ahead and start filling out our mortgage contingency information. So let's say that these people are getting a mortgage for $285,000. They're getting a 30-year note. The type of mortgage here is FHA. Then we're going to get onto the mortgage lender and we're going to write in Sarah. You would put in Novus Home Mortgage, but we're just using Sarah because we love her. Interest rate, we're going to say it's 6.5. And then there's this little line here that I see a lot of documents come in as blank. So basically what you're saying with this is their current interest rate based on today's assumptions is about 6.5%. But if something happens during the time that we're negotiating this and the rates jump, something happens in the market and the rates jump really, really high, they will accept a maximum interest rate of X. And a lot of times that's about a point. So if they have not said, hey, our interest rate, or if the lender says the interest rates can't go above or it's going to kick them out because of DTI or whatever, your mortgage lender will tell you maximum to put in there if you ask. But as a rule of thumb, if you don't know, just always put a point in there. So 6.5 to 7.5 or 6 to 7 or 7 to 8 or whatever, just as a kind of additional layer for your client. It is really unusual that would come into play, to just be clear, but just so you know, it's always a good layer of protection. All right. Now we're going down to the next page where it says seller's representations. And this is where you're going to check the boxes. This seems trivial to check the boxes, but it is important because your lender needs to know what these two categories are, especially if you're using government financing. Okay. So in this particular property, it has public water and it has public sewage. Okay. Pretty cut and dry. But if it was a well, or if it was a septic tank, additional inspections may be required by the lender. If it's community water or no septic tank and there's no way to dispose of waste, well, then that may knock the lending right out. So it is important to make sure that you are putting this in so the lender knows and the client knows what type of public services are available at the property. All right, next we get on to the next page where you fill in some information and it says historic preservation. Seller is not aware of any historic preservation. This usually does not come into play. The only time I've really seen this come into play a lot is in the city of Newcastle on the lower North Hill, where we have a few historic properties where you would have to put this in. So if you know of any type of historic preservation, you would want to go ahead and make sure that some type of note is placed in here. But chances are you won't have to use it very often. Land use restrictions. This would need to be disclosed to you on the listing. It's very seldom that we use it. However, if you're looking at, trying to think of a good one, Farmland and Forest Assessment Act, which is also called the Clean and Green. I sold my grandfather's house. It was 100 acres in Blackhawk. He was under Clean and Green and he was getting huge tax breaks. But that also meant a huge increase of taxes to the new buyer. So that has to be disclosed because the taxes went up 10 times the minute the buyer bought it, and then they had to reapply for the Clean and Green. So just make sure that that is disclosed if you do run into that scenario. If you newer agents, if you run into any of that scenario, just come and see me and we'll go through it together. All right. This goes over public and private assessments. Again, this is something that you'll very rarely use. But if you do run into that situation, please again, come to me. I want to make sure we get over all of the documents. So I'm skipping anything that is rarely used or rarely comes into play. All right. Home inspections. It gives you a list of home inspections that your clients can either elect or waive. First is your home property inspection, which is just your general inspection. This is the most common. Those inspections run anywhere from like $400 to $500, and it basically takes care of everything from the roof the whole way to the basement and the entire outside of the property. So it just kind of checks everything: the furnace, the plumbing, the roof, the hot water tank, the operation of the windows, all of those things. So if you want a general idea of what's going on with the home inspection is a great one for them to select. Next, we go over wood infestation, which is just a pest inspection, and that's what we call it. So that's going to check for all your creepy crawlers. Those are going to be things like termites, carpenter ants, wood boring bees, powder post beetles, any creepy crawlers that can get into the home. And it's usually done by the same inspector. So your home inspector is usually also licensed as a pest inspector as well. Do keep in mind that if they find anything, your pest inspector who did the inspection on the property, it is usually unable to treat the pest. It's usually a different field. So you can ask them. There's very few of those left, but they're usually able to refer you to somebody who can assist with that. So, all right. Going through just real quick, deeds, restrictions, and zonings. That's for things like if you were going to purchase a property, they also want to use for business purposes. You could select that to make sure that they can. Water service is for your well. And there's two different types of well tests you can do. You can do a well flow or a lead nitrate test. They're two different tests, but this covers them both. Radon, on-lot sewage, that would be a sewage test there. Property and flood insurance. This is just ensuring that the property is not within a flood zone and that they have the right to look at the flood maps ahead of time. Property boundaries, also known as a survey. Also keep in mind, surveyors are out about 5 months. So if you are going to do a survey on a property, understand that you will have to do a special addendum to allow for about a 4 to 5 month waiting period for any surveys. And a lead-based paint test. Down here is other. This is for any other inspection that your client may want that is not listed above. Okay. And then this section here, the inspections elected above do not apply for the following existing conditions. So if you made an agreement with the seller in advance that says, hey, I'm open to you having a home inspection, but I will not fix anything on the shed, you're going to put in here that these home inspections exclude the shed. Okay. Down here on the next page is where you put in your time period, and 10 days is pre-written in. I suggest you give yourself a little extra time, especially during busy seasons or when weather conditions crop up like the one we're in now. So if it were me, I'd put 15 days in there just to make sure I had enough time to get the inspector out there and that my clients weren't rushed looking at that report. Okay. So next we go down here, title, surveys, and cost. And there is a line here which you can fill in. 7 days is usually more than enough to deliver your title policy over. So I would keep that at 7. And then the oil, gas, and mineral right addendum that we talked about, check that box to make it part of the agreement. There's not a whole lot that you're going to put on the next lines. So you can go through them. If you are dealing with a condominium or planned community, you can check these boxes here to include it. Single family residential homes would not usually be in a condominium or a planned community unless you're looking at, like an example that would be like a Ryan Homes or something that has a homeowners association. But traditionally what we sell in our area is usually exempt from that, but you will run into that from time to time. Okay. Next, we're going to go ahead and we're going to breeze through these pages just so we can get to the most important parts. And we have here item G, seller is limited to retaining sums paid by the buyer, including deposit monies as liquidated damages. Please check this box. This box states that if this thing goes belly up, the seller is limited to only receiving damages up to the amount of the hand money. They cannot come after the buyer for any additional liquidated damages. Okay. And liquidated damages is real money out of pocket due to breach of contract, for those who do not know. So this just tells them, like, hey, if a lawsuit ensues, all you got is $1,000. Okay. And then we go to the very last page. The very last page goes over any type of addendums that are going to be included in the agreement. So in this training, we've talked about the sale and settlement contingency addendum. If you have one, you would check it here. We're not going to go over the addendums on this call. We do have follow-up trainings coming up on those, so make sure you check those out. But we also talked about the appraisal contingency addendum in here. So if you were doing conventional, you would want to check that appraisal contingency addendum and make sure it's part of your packet. Okay. But in this instance, we don't have any. Any additional terms you would put here, and this is where I was talking about, time period for inspection, start, after, sale and settlement, addendum, activates with accepted offer on buyer's current property, blah, blah, blah. And then we have our signature lines here. They would initial their notices here, sign, and date in this line. All right, hit me. Who has questions on constructing your first offer? No? None? All right, excellent. I either bored the hell out of you or I did a really good job of explaining. I'm not sure which. But thank you guys for holding in there. I know that this one was a lot of information, slightly boring, but I'm glad that you guys went through it. So we are going to do a follow-up mini training on some of the addendums that we will be having. So make sure you take a peek at that. I think that's next month. But I think this should give you a pretty good understanding on how to fill out these documents and get prepared for your first offer. Make sure you knew, guys, when you're doing your first offer, do not be afraid to reach out to me or your mentor if I am not your mentor. If you're scheduled in with Mary, you can reach out to Mary, you can reach out to me, we will do it together. Do not stress over preparing that first offer or second offer or third offer or whatever you got going on. We're a team here, we do it together. All right. Well, thank you guys for completing all 10 weeks of Ultimate Launch. And for those of you who did not get to attend all meetings, again, we start those back up in March. And I will have this training posted to both the blog and our YouTube channel within a couple of days here. So feel free and come back and rewatch anything that you missed. But thanks, guys, and stay warm today.
Thanks, Christina.